This week's 1044 is brought to you by Chevron Delos 600 ADF Ultra Low Ash Diesel Engine Oil. It's time to kick some ash.
How artificial intelligence can help improve driver utilization and maximize fleet efficiency.
Hey everybody, and welcome back to the 1044, a weekly webisode from the editors here at CCJ. I'm Jason Cannon, and my co-host, as always, on the other side is Matt Cole. Trucking companies everywhere are always looking for ways to become more efficient. Whether that's with a driver, truck utilization, or something else, most fleets have areas they can improve on.
One way that is emerging that can help fleets is by using artificial intelligence to find ways to be more efficient. Today we are joined by Priyesh Ranjan, CEO of AI-driven supply chain platform Vorto, who talks about how Vorto started out as a TMS provider and came to be driven by AI.
I came in 2017, 2018. And at the time, we used to be a transportation management software company, like a TMS. And kind of one of the main aspects that we were very heavily focused on is how do we fix driver utilization and maximize efficiencies. And we were starting to realize that being a TMS company would not solve for that, as supply chain is very complex, all the way from how procurement happens, logistics happens, scheduling of pickup appointment times, picking a carrier, picking a driver, so on and so forth. So we shut the company down and we started a new platform. That's when I came in. And it was an autonomous supply chain platform where we automated procurement and logistics at the same time. And to our surprise, within a year, I think our run rate was about $2.3 billion through the platform. So this thing took over pretty quickly. And one of the biggest value propositions that it drove is it was a fully automated platform, all the way from predicting the demand for the shipper to sourcing raw materials from suppliers to scheduling pickup appointment times to tendering to the carrier to dispatching the driver to paying the driver. Everything was fully automated. And because of that, what the software was able to do, it was able to constantly react to changes in supply chain, which allowed us to move the same amount of payload with 66% less trucks. And that's kind of where the aha moment clicked in, that we need to really progress in this journey.
Last year, Vorto launched 5F, a fully integrated transportation platform that links shippers and brokers, owner-operators, asset owners, yard and maintenance facilities, and drivers.
Post-COVID, a lot of the customers came to us and said, look, you guys have already built a software platform that shippers use, suppliers use, carriers use. Why don't you all get into trucking, considering there's so much driver shortage? So as we started looking into the trucking world, we started realizing that there were a lot of manual aggregators who play different roles to provide capacity to shippers. And the learning was 96% of America's carriers are less than 20 trucks, so very small carriers. And the $800 billion of shippers are all fragmented too. So you would end up having a broker in the middle who goes and aggregates the shippers. You would end up having carriers in the middle who would go and aggregate owner-operators. And then you would have all these different groups working with each other. So we launched a platform called 5F, where there are basically 5 customers. Shippers and brokers bring the volume to it. Owner-operators bring the trucking capacity to it. Asset owners put assets on it so that the owner-operators have access to different types of trailers. May that be reefers, dry van, and so forth. There is a whole yard and maintenance infrastructure where a lot of maintenance shops are on it, where they are the ones who maintain those assets and secure those assets, so you can find them all across the country. And then there is a database of drivers that we let the owner-operators access so they can hire more drivers. So 5F is basically taking all those different angles of interactions that all have to come together for trucking to happen. That means connecting the shippers and the brokers with capacity and assets and have the infrastructure. Obviously, it's a software platform, so it's a very asset-light concept where it's letting all these participants come in and automatically transact with each other. And 5F has been incredibly successful. We launched this in March 7th of last year. And within a short period of time, we went to 3,000 to now, I think, a little over 6,000 owner-operators on the platform, as well as shippers and brokers on the platform.
Priyesh said freight transportation is one of the most inefficient industries he's come across. Earlier this summer, when fears of a diesel shortage surfaced, which thankfully didn't come to fruition, the effects of such a shortage would have exacerbated the already inefficient trucking industry.
Freight itself is probably one of the most inefficient industries that I have ever come across. 40% of a trucker's time is either idle or it's deadhead, right? So it's empty miles. So you already have this incredible inefficiency. And the way we get through it is brute force and by just paying more, right? So the consumer pays more for that inefficiency so that the trucker can, for basic means, just break even. And now if you create this kind of a shortage of diesel, you would have stranded trucks all over, right? You would have to do rationing and so on and so forth. And there wouldn't be any short-term answer. Like there's a lot of efforts going on with electric trucks, but all those things are not short-term solutions. Those are technologies being evolved where eventually I can see a world where they would do short hauls with relays so that they could drop and hook and they could create certain networks like trains, like small little trains, right? For a lot of that to happen, it's going to take some time. A lot of technology has to get developed. A lot of adoption has to happen. In the short term, it would just be mayhem, to put it simple.
Priyesh said the inefficiencies of trucking are where AI can come in to help. But before we hear more about that, let's hear a word from 1044 sponsor Chevron Lubricants. Protecting your diesel engine and its aftertreatment system has traditionally been a double-edged sword. The same engine oil that is so essential to protecting your engine's internal parts is also responsible for 90% of the ash that is clogging up your DPF and upping your fuel and maintenance costs. Outdated industry thinking still sees a trade-off between engine and emission system protection, and Chevron was tired of it. So they spent a decade of R&D developing a no-compromise formulation. Chevron Lubricants developed a new ultra-low ash diesel engine oil that is specifically designed to combat DPF ash clogging. Delo 600 ADF with OmniMax technology cuts sulfate ash by a whopping 60%, which reduces the rate of DPF clogging and extends DPF service life by 2.5 times. And just think what you can do with all the MPGs you're going to add from cutting your number of regens. But Delo 600 ADF isn't just about aftertreatment. It provides complete protection, extending drain intervals by preventing oil breakdown. Before you had to choose between protecting your engine or your aftertreatment system, and now you don't. 600 ADF from Delo with OmniMax technology, it's time to kick some ash.
If I had to kind of simplify this, is kind of what the root cause is and how AI ends up solving for this is the problem statement here is you have two sides of the equation. You have one side where you have shippers, which I was mentioning is about $800 billion of freight, right? And all of them are incredibly small. Like a shipper would do $5 million in a year or $50 million in a year or maybe $100 million. So they're very small. So because they're so small, the country is so big. So they're looking for truckers. And on the trucking side, you have 600,000 carriers because they are so small, right? So now a shipper cannot go and build 5,000 relationships, or a trucker cannot go and build 5,000 relationships. So it's a matchmaking problem. So what has happened, unfortunately, in today's world is shippers tend to go through multiple layers to go find this truck. But because they go through multiple layers, the truck ends up not having any efficiencies. So they'll end up doing a load to some Idaho, for example, and then they won't have a load coming out of Idaho, right? So the way AI solves for these kinds of problems is a computer is able to very quickly figure out how do I mix the volume of different shippers and match it to truckers who match those preferences. That is humanly impossible to do if you and I try to do it, right? Because it changes every day. From the way we are using AI is we basically are solving for just two things. One, reducing the deadhead and idle time for truckers by mixing and matching these loads so their earnings go up. Second, dropping the line haul, the rate to the consumer, which is a shipper, or in our case, it's a shipper or a broker. Both of them give us volume. And you create a win-win, right? They want capacity. You're giving them good, reliable capacity at a lower cost. Truckers want volume. You're giving them good volume at a higher earnings. And it kind of is an interesting dynamic. Sometimes it's a head scratcher. So the earnings go up for the trucker and the rates go down for a shipper. That just tells you how inefficient this matchmaking problem is, that there is so much fat in the middle that AI can remove. Just simple numbers I'll give you. In the short haul world, we work in the oil and gas world as well. I think we have reduced the rate for shippers by almost 48%, while the earnings for truckers has gone up by 50%. So you can just see like it's incredible. The OTR world, over the road, it's a different problem statement. The country is very big and deadhead and idle time is solved in a different way. Even in that, just ballpark numbers, shippers have seen 20 to 25% reduction in their freight costs, while truckers have seen 30 to 40% higher earnings above market. So this problem gets solved in every market. You're solving it differently. but you're using the same tools where you're just saying, okay, how do I reduce idle time and deadhead and from the trucker's life at the same time give the shipper good capacity by mixing other shippers, because every shipper is too small to create efficiencies, but a computer can mix all the other shippers and almost create a volume advantage where you may be a small guy, but because you're on a platform where everybody gets mixed, you end up getting good capacity as a shipper. The same thing works for a trucker. You may be a very small guy, may only have 3 trucks, but because the platform has over 6,000 owner operators, it gives you the efficiencies of a large platform. And that's kind of what we're solving for both sides of the equation.
Priyesh also talks about how AI can help improve transportation's impact on the environment.
Transportation is a huge consumer of fossil fuels, depending on the year, depending on what's happening in the global economy. When I say transportation, I mean everything: freight, ocean, the whole 9 yards, right? Air. And depending on the year, depending on what's happening in the economy, you'll always see 50 to 56, 57% of the consumption comes from transportation, right? If you saw when the oil prices went down during COVID, it's because the world had locked down and half of the demand had gone away, right? So a lot of the carbon emissions come from that, right? I mean, it's not a no-brainer, right? It's very, very simple, right? So the world is moving in different directions, right? They're trying to change the composition of where energy comes from. May that be electric, may that be renewables, may that be fossil fuels, right? But there is also another angle in that transition, which will take some time because it's a very multifaceted and a complex problem statement. It's also, how do we solve for our consumption behaviors and how do we consume these things? And the simplest way in the trucking world you can reduce carbon emission is by solving for efficiency and reducing the idle time and deadhead.
That's it for this week's 1044. You can read more on ccjdigital.com, and as always, you can find the 1044 each week on CCJ's YouTube channel. And if you've got questions, comments, criticisms, or feedback, please hit us up at 1044trucking@gmail.com or give us a call at 404-491-1380. Until next week, everybody stay safe.